What's up everyone, it's your boy, Lizzo's Back Sweat here, and welcome to this iteration of Pokemon Hardcore Nuzlocks. This time around, I attempted what I thought was potentially the easiest Mono-Type Nuzlocke challenge in the entire Pokemon franchise, completing a Pokemon Leaf Green Nuzlocke while only using Water-type Pokemon. Fire Red and Leaf Green are widely accepted to be the simplest games to Nuzlocke as it is, and with good reason. Nuzlocks are by nature supposed to restrict the player's team building options, but this particular challenge showed me that sometimes taking all of the crayons out of the box and leaving just a handful free to work with can actually be a little more inspirational. Anyway, the rules for the run are right here, and they can also be found down in the description. Without further ado, let's get into it. We begin the run with the most obvious encounter available to us in Squirtle, who also happens to be the first starter that I ever chose in my first ever playthrough of any Pokemon game. Our rival, Fire, disappointingly did not live up to his name and chose the grass starter Bulbasaur instead. Before our first battle, I checked our new pal Tortex's stats, and his serious nature isn't exactly mind-blowing, but we can't always have everything our way. Life is not a Burger King, Ed boy. After Tortex clutched up with 1 HP in a dream in his first real taste of battle, there wasn't much else to do except head to Brock and challenge him for our first gym badge. And I think all of you can probably gather what happened in this fight. If you ever have lost to Brock after picking Squirtle or Bulbasaur, you may need to find a new hobby. After battling through a legion of youngsters and lasses, I was rewarded with endless amounts of shame when I realized I couldn't afford the Magikarp that this scalper sells you in the Mount Moon Pokemon Center. However, I'm a crafty young fellow, and I managed to scrape together enough funds to purchase my future ace. After that, we ventured into Mount Moon, where I took the Helix fossil. I figured you guys would ask— wait, wrong YouTuber. I don't want to waste your time or my time, so let's get right into the Misty battle. We lead with Gyarados, who bites a chunk out of Staryu's ass 3 times in a row. MXR was at max health because of a flinch on the second turn, and I was feeling pretty good heading into Starmie. I live and die by the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if I wanted to truly practice what I preach, then of course I would use only Bite to finish out the battle. We weren't even at the level cap and we made swift work of Misty's Pokemon. No pun intended. Badge 2 down. 6 more to go. Up next was the Cerulean City rival fight, but other than a slight mishap on Bulbasaur that almost see us shit the bed and lose Gyarados pretty early in the run, it was a clean sweep of his other team members. How about we talk about an actual challenging battle instead? I was fully expecting Lieutenant Surge to be an automatic reset because the only way I could win this battle was by sheer luck and nothing more. MXR needed to have the most clutch performance out of any Pokemon I've ever used in my life. Turn 1 was literally perfect. I didn't care about the paralysis since we were faster anyway, but Voltorb choosing Sonic Boom over Shockwave was the first on our checklist of luck. After Surge healed his foe Pokeball, we dispatched it 2 turns later with another secret power. Pikachu was up next and we had to avoid a paralysis from Static, which, lo and behold, we did. But now is where the RNG would really be giving me heart palpitations. And the only possible way I could even see this run being possible, with the power of love. The odds of Attract working when you need it to are slim to none in my experience, but for the first time in my life, I can actually say that I took out Lieutenant Surge's entire team using nothing but Water-type Pokemon. Granted, it was with one of the entire franchise's strongest Pokemon, but the chances of me replicating that amount of luck have to be near zero. I was actually in disbelief after this battle. Before taking on Erica, there's another squad member that we've got to pick up. Even though Jazz 3 the Vaporeon is the subject of one of the most criminal copy pastas I've ever had the misfortune of reading, he slots right into the team. Look, it's not Vaporeon's fault that some weirdo out there was having a perverse sexual fantasy about it. Vaporeon is the victim in this scenario. It's kind of like the Lorena Bobbitt situation. Like, she was being treated like shit and abused for years, but my mind just keeps coming back to, God damn, she really chopped that motherfucker's dick off. That's crazy. Not only that, but when the police showed up to the scene, one of the cops was a devout Catholic, and he refused to pick up Mr. Bobbitt's dismembered Bobbit off the ground because he thought it was gay. That is a hell of a thing. Alright, well, that's enough of that tangent for now. Moral of the story to all my fellow men out there, if you ever get your dick cut off, make sure to have someone around who is comfortable with their sexuality so they can throw that shit in the freezer as soon as possible. Erica sent out Tangela next, and after taking a Giga Drain like a champ, the following turn saw Tangela throw the game harder than the referees from Real Madrid against Bayern the other day, which meant an easy knockout for MXR. Erica was down to just her ace Vileplume. I was happy to see that Giga Drain didn't really do much, but I knew the clock was still ticking for Gyarados, and I needed something big, and my prayers were answered from a huge Ice Beam freeze. I had a free turn to attack, but MXR just missed Hyper Beam. Now, despite all of this, MXR showed us why after all these years, she is still one of the most reliable and trustworthy brand of guitar effects pedals after she nailed Vileplume with the Hyper Beam to seal our victory and our 4th gym badge. The most important side quest in this run could finally be completed after defeating Erica. Obtaining the Super Rod from the Fishing Guru's younger brother lets us gain access to a whole host of pretty sick encounters. The first one being the only water type that can rival Gyarados in the Kanto region, in my humble opinion. Staryu. Well, it's not Staryu, it's Starmie that's the more useful one. Thankfully, Strymon wound up having the natural cure ability because its alternative, Illuminate, is completely and utterly useless and should never have been put into the game to begin with. Our next encounter is from Viridian City, and it'll give us some much needed coverage attacks in the late game against Lorelei. Demarzio the Poliwhirl is destined to become the buffest frog on the face of the earth, and destroy any ice, rock, or fire types that come in this way. Just look at how threatening he is even now. After using some water stones to evolve Strymon and Demarzio, our next test came in the form of one poison type Pokemon, Master, by way of Koga. Our boy Koga has one small problem though, and that is the fact that Starmie exists. Koga jumped the gun and brought in Muck after his first coughing went down, but it only took a couple turns, and that's only because he healed up after we barely missed out on a one-shot with Psychic. I'm not even going to talk about what happened to the second coughing. And you know what? I don't even need to mention wheezing either. That's badge number 5 down in the most convincing fashion thus far. I think now's a pretty good time to finally showcase a rival fight. Silphco is the turning point in the game when the difficulty jumps from Weenie Hut Jr. to Weenie Hut General. Fire sends out his lead Pidgeot, and I send out Tortex. It's been a while since Tortex has gotten some love, but he didn't let that phase him. Pidgeot gets done in with a second Ice Beam, and then Fire sends in his ace Venusaur, which causes me to promptly switch into MXR. She takes Razor Leaf like a champ, because that's simply what she does. She's also my only reliable answer in the Venusaur. Next turn, the carnage begins. And by carnage, I actually mean chipping away at our opponent's health bar with Ice Beam because Gyarados' special attack is appalling. It's not the end of the world though. I'll just have to shut up and take that damage output. After eliminating Venusaur, the battle became a lot less stressful. Fire sends in his Gyarados next, but I figured this was something that Jazz 3 could handle. But then he got flinched from a bite and I was like, you know what, maybe he's not built for this. Luckily, we connected with Hypnosis on the first try, and of course it didn't really matter too much because our opponent woke up on the first possible turn, which is just amazing now, isn't it? After sending Jazz 3 back in and battling him to the brink of death, I sent MXR back in to clean up the trash, and then take out the remaining members of our rival's team. Having a battle like this off the back of complete domination against Koga was definitely humbling and showed me that I still need to take care against my opponents. We only needed to walk a couple more steps for our next encounter too. One of the best gift Pokemon you can get in the franchise. Meet Katana the Lapras. Outside of the Mega Lucario that you gain as a gift in X and Y, I think this Lapras is probably the best Pokemon that you get for doing absolutely nothing. The next boss battle that we have is technically Giovanni, but I look back at the footage and honestly there's not really much here to see. Nidorino got one shot from a Rain Dance boosted Surf, Nidoqueen met the same fate as her dimorphic counterpart, Kangaskhan maybe used about 4 more brain cells worth of activity compared to the other two, and Rhyhorn was just a simple one-shot again with Surf. The only problem that popped up for this battle though was that I accidentally over-leveled Vaporeon, so I wouldn't be able to use him against Sabrina. Going up against Sabrina with only 4 Pokemon that don't pack a lot of punch in the physical attack department wasn't something I was particularly looking forward to. Gyarados is a fantastic Pokemon across all generations, but this is one battle where I definitely wish that Bite was a physical move. Be that as it may, I couldn't complain about being faster than her Kadabra and knocking it out without taking any damage. Mr. Mime was a slightly trickier customer. It only did a smidge of damage with Psybeam, and it didn't confuse us, so that was cool. I swapped into Tortex once Venomoth came in because I wanted Gyarados preserved in the back just in case some insanity happened in the battle. I had a couple comfortable win conditions floating around in my head that involved a little bit less risk, and for the first choice, I needed to have Lapras out on the field when Alakazam came out. Luckily, Venomoth missed its Supersonic, and Katana was able to dispatch her opponent accordingly. And this is where the fun begins, and where I realized just how stupid my plan actually was. In my head, I was like, hey, Parasong is a guaranteed win after 3 turns, so let me just use that. But then after Alakazam used Calm Mind, I was like, oh shit, I could definitely get swept after one more of those things. And then on the next turn, I opted for Body Slam to play around our foe's special defense boost, and then that's when I realized if I just used Body Slam last turn, that I would have just won the battle right now. In the end, it didn't really matter because Sabrina elected to use one of Alakazam's final moments in battle to heal its paralysis, which meant its Perish Song counter fell to 1. That gave me the win right there because all I had to do now was protect with Blastoise, guaranteeing my victory at the end of the turn. I made this battle a hell of a lot more complicated than it needed to be, but hey, at least I know for future efforts now that the Lapras with 0 EV training whatsoever can 2-shot Sabrina's Alakazam with Body Slam. After I surfed my way to Cinnabar Island, it was time for another encounter. When I was a kid, I loved the concept of the fossil Pokemon. I think Fire Red and Leaf Green could have improved upon the accessibility of them since you can't actually use them until pretty late into the game, but I got a kick out of seeing what Pokemon came back to life from each fossil for the first time. After stepping outside for a couple Mississippi's worth of time, I stepped back into the Goofy Scientist lab and picked up our new buddy Ammonite. There's only one nickname that is acceptable for him. He doesn't have the Shell Armor ability, which was kind of a bummer, but I made the decision that I would at least include him in the battle for Blaine in the spirit of variety. In other good news, I could finally use Starmie and Vaporeon again since they were no longer above the level cap. Speaking of which, I didn't even bother leveling up my Pokemon to the cap since the battle was already going to be easy enough. Unfortunately, I realized I probably should have gone overkill and leveled up Starmie to the cap. Those last few pixels of HP were insulting me. Anticipating a heal and not seeing the need and repeating the same exact turn over again, I switched out to Vaporeon so I could set up a Rain Dance on the following turn. That would pretty much guarantee a KO from Surf. Next turn, Jazz 3 hunkered down, took a takedown fairly well, and sent Arcanine to the Shadow Realm. Poor Ponyta. Never even stood a chance. Blaine was down to his fourth and final Pokemon, Rapidash. This was Lord Helix's time to shine. I sent him in to close out the battle in the commanding fashion that only he's capable of. Swift Swim was still in effect for my range, so he struck first with Rock Tomb. I probably could have ended the battle with a rain boosted Surf, but honestly, I wanted to prolong it just so I could see our Lord and Savior in battle for a little bit longer. This battle took about as much mental effort as watching paint dry, so let's get into the battle for the final gym badge. Yeah, who the hell am I kidding? Giovanni is arguably the easiest 8th gym leader in the entire franchise. If your team has a single water type, you win. That's it. Fuck Doug Trio, we don't support polygamy in this household. Nidoqueen took me like 3 extra turns, but that's about it. And then Nidoking got fucking obliterated by the most unnecessary Hyper Beam in the history of Pokemon. Yeah, in terms of acquiring gym badges, a water type Monolock and Kanto might be the easiest challenge you could do. That's all 8 badges, folks. Before we take on Victory Road and the Pokemon League, we have one more major battle in the form of our rival. I lead with Strymon, and we launch a Thunderbolt at his Pidgeot that barely misses out on the one-shot. At this point, I was really starting to regret not EV training my Pokemon. I've just been using my dubiously acquired rare candy stash to bump my Pokemon up to the next level cap at each point in these runs. And in my opinion, it adds a little extra challenge on top of what I'm already trying to accomplish. Fire Red and Leaf Green are especially easy games to Nuzlocke even with restrictions, so the way I see it, it's more entertaining for everybody involved. Also, this battle was probably the longest one in the entire run, because Fire's Venusaur was being a pain in the ass and it kept healing itself with Synthesis. After a few turns of hoping Venusaur would go for literally any other move on the planet, I decided to switch into Katana and try out a Stab Ice Beam for a change. Next turn, Katana held on through an Overgrow boosted Razor Leaf, which was definitely something I thought about and calculated before I made that move, and definitely not an unnecessary risk. We need not discuss what happened to Rhyhorn. Gyarados was up next, and I assumed Katana's low HP meant a random move was coming out. I was correct, but I didn't think Fire would douse any chances of him winning with a Rain Dance. Gyarados getting one-shot by Thunderbolt? Who would have seen that coming? I also have no idea why your rival still has a Growlithe this far into the game. Still makes no sense after all these years. Strymon stayed in for Alakazam because the only move that has that can damage us is Psychic, so this was a guaranteed win here. 2 more Surfs did the job, which marked the end of my exploits in mainland Kanto. Every battle from now on would be against the top of the top. The cream de la cream. There were a lot of possible encounters that I had at my disposal that I didn't bother using because they were just outclassed by the current 6 I had on my team. It was time to sit back, evaluate my team, switch up movesets, and prepare for the Elite Four and the Champion. For the final stretch, there wasn't much that I had to change. I also kept most of my team at level 50 instead of leveling up to the level cap of 55 to match Lancer's Dragonite. Well, here goes nothing. First up in Pokemon's classic Elite Four is Lorelei's Water and Ice types. My response, MXR. I begin with a Dragon Dance with the idea to just set up and obliterate her whole team, and Dugong made it much easier for me. A second Dragon Dance was followed by a Hail. I guess Lorelei is just here for the vibes. 3 Dragon Dances in and Lorelei finally seemed interested in doing some damage to my team with a fairly powerful Ice Beam. Next turn, I was prepared to wreak havoc, but I was shocked when I saw Dugong hang on with what was probably 1 HP. This triggered a healing turn by Lorelei, so I knew I had a free turn to get MXR up to +4 attack and speed. I just couldn't believe that I had to get at +4 to get the KO. Cloyster was up next, and I anticipated that I wouldn't be able to one-shot her because of her stellar defense stat, and luckily, it only went for Hail and nothing that actually was threatening. A couple turns of Protect spam later, and I finally eliminated the Clussy from the battlefield. I also came to the realization that MXR was in danger of dying from Hail chip damage pretty soon, so I switched her out into Jazz 3, who was not affected by Slowbro's incoming Surf. Jazz 3 claimed its first Toxic victim. There wasn't much Slowbro could do to us, so she yawned in a feeble attempt to put us to sleep. What followed was several turns of switcheroos while Slowbro's health slowly declined. Eventually, I made the decision to keep Strymon in and take out Slowbro with Thunderbolt. This seems like a simple decision on the surface, but this meant Strymon would be asleep and out of commission for the end of the turn. And to answer your question, no, I did not grab any Chesto Berries throughout the entire playthrough. A couple of switches later, and Vaporeon found his way back onto the battlefield with the same goal in mind as last time. All we had to do was survive Body Slam and connect with Toxic, and thankfully we did both. Unfortunately, I made a slightly boneheaded error because I forgot to account for Lapras' Citrus Berry as well as Tortex's lack of threat in this fight. I had a feeling I should have replaced Bite with Brick Break, and Turns out I should have listened to my gut. Lapras barely survived the toxic damage, and this meant she would fully heal on the next turn and I'd have to start all over again. So I sent in Demarzio on Lorelei's healing turn, tanked through Body Slam Paralysis to connect Hypnosis, swap back into Strymon, connect with 1 Thunderbolt, 2 Thunderbolt, 3 Thunderbolts to finish off Nessie. Jinx was last on the chopping block and Strymon was on a roll, so I just let him cook. Our second surf narrowly missed out on the kill, and I unknowingly risked a death to a critical hit right here. Luckily for me, we kept our whole squad intact after a battle that was a lot tougher than I initially imagined. Time to heal up and head to the next battle. The mere presence of Starmie on my team made me feel like Bruno was going to be a pushover compared to Lorelei. Boy, was I wrong. I went in with what I thought was a foolproof plan. It was simple on paper: hit his first Onyx with Hypnosis, set up bulk ups while it was asleep, then just destroy his team with my absolutely yoked Tadpole. After a couple of whipped Hypnosises, I finally connected with one and then started Poliwrath on his new workout regimen. Keep in mind that at this point, I used bulk up 3 times. So our defense and attack were both at +3. I wouldn't need that extra attack for either of Bruno's Onyx because any water attack from a reasonably strong Pokemon obliterates them, but that added defense was going to carry me through to the rest of the fight. At least that's what I thought until Hitmonchan came in and knocked Demarzio into next week with a critical hit Sky Uppercut. I couldn't even avenge Poliwrath because, you know, lack of EVs on your Pokemon means you can't knock out a fighting type with a Stab Psychic. So then I thought to myself, hey, maybe Gyarados can 2-shot Hitmonchan with Return. That seems reasonable. No. Not at all. In fact, we were the ones that almost got taken by surprise after Hitmonchan apparently snuck a fucking Landsat variant into his pre-workout with these damn crits. I finally got some relief when Hitmonchan went for Mach Punch on the Switch. I was able to put an end to his little rampage and safely take him out on the next turn with no critical hits happening, believe it or not. Hitmonlee was up next, and by the grace of God, he finally got a taste of his own medicine. Machamp seemed a little scary to deal with here, and I knew I wanted to switch out, but into what, I did not know. I eventually settled on Jazz 3, even though, looking back on it, I could have done a ton of damage this turn with Psychic. I don't know what possessed me to stay in and set up Rain Dance, but that's what I did, and I own that decision 100%. There would be no toxic stalling because of Machamp's Guts ability, so I was hoping for a 2-shot with a Rain Boosted Surf. It seemed likely, but Bruno's BS knows no bounds. I switched into Tortex hoping that his higher defense stat would be able to mitigate some of Machamp's firepower. We just weren't dealing enough damage with Surf, and things were looking bleak after Machamp set up another bulk up. I knew what I had to do, but boy did I not like the decision I had to make. Sacrifices are necessary in Nuzlocke sometimes. It just sucks when it's a team member that's been with you from the start. This was possibly the most humbling battle in the entire run. I went into this run thinking that it would be a piece of cake and thinking that this particular battle would be one of the easiest late game fights. Into the fight against Agatha's old decrepit ass, and we come out to a hot start with Strymon. One Psychic is usually all it takes to take down most of her team, and this was no exception. Her Golbat came in and met the same fate. Arbok, dead. Things got slightly more complicated when her second Gengar came in. It was actually able to connect with Hypnosis, but I was seasoned enough to know that the only real way this Gengar can harm me is through Nightmare and Dream Eater. Meaning, if I send in a Pokemon that's not asleep, well, she can't do shit to me. The only issue with this strategy is that if the replacement Pokemon gets put to sleep, then I'm kinda screwed. Haha, you fool, you've fallen into my trap. Yeah, remember way back in the video when we first caught Strymon, and I commented on how useful the Natural Cure ability is? Well, it proved useful in this battle. With Strymon no longer asleep, I was able to sweep up the rest of Agatha's team, meaning that Starmie single-handedly eliminated our opponent's entire team. Take a bow, son. When I was in the beginning stages of the run, I thought Lance was also going to be one of the easier late-game battles, considering most of my Pokemon were packing Ice Beam. Only having 4 Pokemon, though, definitely lowered my confidence. But with Strymon still alive, I knew my chances of success were also alive. And well, I hit Gyarados with a Psychic on turn 1, that way I could ensure a KO with Thunderbolt on the next turn. Lance's first Dragonair was next, and this near miss with Ice Beam is the reason why I used Psychic on that first turn against Gyarados. I was afraid of that happening. Luckily for us, Strymon's Natural Cure means that Thunder Wave won't affect us. On Katana's first turn in battle, she took an Outrage pretty well, and countered with a powerful Ice Beam that unfortunately wasn't powerful enough to get the one-shot. We could still pick up the KO next turn, but that extra damage from that second Outrage drastically alters my switching options for the whole battle. Lance sent out Aerodactyl, and I was shitting myself because I had no idea what move he was going to use or what to switch into. I settled on Jazz 3 because the harsh reality of the situation was that he was the most expendable member of the squad at this point. He was the only one I could count on to tank at least a couple hits, and thankfully, Aerodactyl didn't get an Omni Boost from Ancient Power. This was a turn where I honestly should have lost the whole run. I thought Lance would heal Aerodactyl here, so I switched in the Strymon, who narrowly avoided getting vaporized by Hyper Beam. And that's when Lance sent in the Big Kahuna, one of the most unstoppable Pokemon of yesteryear that, in the current age, can be decimated by a friggin' Rabombi. I sent in MXR to hopefully tank a hit, which thankfully came from Outrage and not Thunderbolt. And it pains me to admit this, but I knew well enough that the only way we would win was if we spilt more blood on our side. Jazz 3 was a wonderful servant, and he will be greatly missed. Damn it, I will avenge my fallen comrade if it's the last thing I do. Dragonite was meant to hurt itself in confusion. Katana was destined to destroy her enemy with Ice Beam. We were destined to honor Jazz 3 in the only way that we know how. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is with victory. Only one more trainer stands in our way after Lance. One more obstacle. One more challenge. One more battle with the biggest fucking douchebag rival in the history of the Pokemon franchise. You know how I know he's a douchebag? Simple. This dude unironically has a Pidgeot on his team. Why are you using this complete, utter shite when Fearow exists? You know what? I don't even feel bad that his Pidgeot got frozen here. You know why? Because Pidgeot stinks. It is hot. Stinking. Garbage. Doesn't matter if it's a Rhyhorn or a Rhydon. I'm still not going to bother mentioning it. Venusaur was up next, and I felt confident enough to stay in because this ain't my first rodeo, and I knew that this dude was going to go for Solar Beam, which meant free damage for me. I switched into MXR in the next turn while crossing my fingers and toes, hoping that he'd survive the Solar Beam. But she always eats her Wheaties, so I knew she'd come through. There was one slight problem. Venusaur was charging another Solar Beam that would clearly kill MXR, and I needed a miracle to knock out Venusaur. But if there's one thing about me, we hit those crits, baby! What the fuck is a strategy? Alakazam was up next, and we couldn't pick up the KO before it set up Future Sight, and unfortunately that meant we had to sit through not one, but 2 healing turns, which meant that we would be taking said Future Sight attack to the face. But you know what? MXR is built different. Oh shit, yeah, I forgot. He actually used 3 of his 4 full restores on Alakazam alone, which was huge. Looking back, I may have been able to use more Dragon Dances, but I didn't see the point when I thought about his Arcanine with extreme speed in the back. Fire sent out his Gyarados next. MXR and I exchanged a glance that only her and I could understand. You know, one of those cliche glances that 2 people share in movies and shit before one of them has to sacrifice themselves. I had to sacrifice MXR for a free switch into Katana. That's the point I'm trying to make here. I don't know if that little bit of damage from MXR's return mattered in the overall damage calc, but I'd like to think it did. MXR's contributions over the course of the whole run set us up for ultimate victory, and this battle was no different. With Katana out in the field against Fire's final Pokemon, our win condition was set. I could have used Surf and potentially gotten Arcanine's HP down to the yellow. I didn't want to do a bunch of damage and just see it get nullified with a full restore at the death. So, there was one option, survive Flamethrower, and then sing the unholiest of songs. Katana goes down, and then it was just a one-on-one. Winner take all. Our ace Strymon takes the field as Arcanine's Perish count falls to 2. To my surprise, we strike first with Surf, and I waited in silent agony to see if it would be enough to kill, but sadly it wouldn't be enough. Now, I could only watch and hope that Strymon survived the oncoming bite, which he did. He actually did it with plenty of HP to spare. Arcanine's Perish count falls to 1, and in true Gen 3 AI fashion, our rival makes the fatal mistake of healing Arcanine with a full restore, leaving it wide open to take a huge Surf that left it reeling in the red. But none of that even matters because at the end of the turn, Arcanine's Perish count falls to 0, sealing the victory against Champion Fire, and thus sealing our victory in our Water-type only Nuzlocke of Pokemon Leaf Green. Take a bow, Strymon. Hats off to you, my friend. That battle against the champion was one of the most intense battles I've had in a very long time. Going into the run, I was fully convinced that the only roadblock I would face was the Lieutenant Surge battle and that everything else would pretty much be a cakewalk. That Elite Four run was a humbling experience, and it showed me that I should probably start to plan out certain battles a little bit more in advance if I want to take myself seriously as a Nuzlocker. But at the end of the day, all of this isn't good fun, and if I was able to entertain you guys watching, that's all that really matters in my book. If you liked what you saw from me in this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button by hitting that big button that says subscribe under the video, and stay tuned for more in the future. I've been Flock of Turtles, you've been amazing, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon. See you guys later.